Welcome back to ThinkTech. Welcome back to Talking Tax. More specifically, welcome back to Talking Tax with Tom. And that means Tom Yamachika. We're talking about bills on state-county relations, really important issue that has been unresolved for decades. The state is not all-powerful. I'm going to ask Tom to talk about that. There's been confusion about where the state is and where the county is in so many ways over the years. It hasn't been resolved. The relationship hasn't been resolved, and maybe that's just a lack of understanding about what it is or should be. Like, for example, the roads. We got state roads, we got county roads. Nobody knows which one. They are maintained differently. They're organized differently. Why aren't they the same right here in Honolulu? And the DOE issues, from time to time, there have been discussions about, the DOE becoming a county organization, as it is in most places in the country, instead of a state organization. We haven't worked that out. And then, of course, the gross excise on rail, the surcharge on gross excise here in Honolulu for rail, which includes a collection fee. I don't understand it yet. And so that's another issue where the relationship hasn't been established or at least thought through properly. So here we are in terms of the relationship between the state and federal, and it's troubling. And now in this session, we have three bills that are going to impact state and county issues and relationship. Welcome to the show, Tom, your show. So let's talk about these bills that are pending at the ledge this year, 2023, that touch on the state-county relationship.
Sure. Well, we're going to be talking about lots of stuff. You've touched on many issues in the introduction. I wanted to focus on, some of the bills that are actually in the legislature right now. There is one that talks about this thing called pilot, which is a payment in lieu of tax. The problem has come up because we've had farmers get persuaded to put some solar panels on their land, and as a result of doing that, they got hit with massive property tax bills, and we'll talk about why that happens. And the pilot program basically says, okay, we will allow the counties to enact a pilot program so that people can basically pay off the property tax on these solar panels right away, and then that'll be the end of it. But as we shall see, that's kind of not the end of the issue.
What are the structural functions of that bill? What's supposed to happen under it?
Again, it's supposed to take things like the solar panels and provide a mechanism for property owners to make a payment to settle all property taxes related to the solar panels once and for all, and then they move on into the next year anyway. But the problem goes deeper than that. The problem happened in Oahu primarily because there were some lands that were dedicated agriculture. Dedicated agriculture is a classification that you can have under the Honolulu property tax system, and they will assess you at 1% of fair market value. But you in turn need to promise that all that you're going to have on your land is agriculture. So we have some property owners that had on their property a papaya farm, and then to bring in a little extra cash, they added a solar farm. Inspectors from the Real Property Tax Division came out to these properties and said, "Hey, you got this solar farm over there. That's not agriculture. You have breached the promise in your dedication, and therefore we're going to reclass your property as industrial and tax you accordingly." That also, a fortiori, that also means that the 1% of fair market value shtick is no longer good. So massive property tax consequences result, regarding in one taxpayer going from like 20,000 to 800,000 in one
Oh,
go. But that's what happens. That's what happens when you breach your promises. Uh, and and uh, the fault that I have with this bill is, number one, the state doesn't have any jurisdiction over property tax. None. Okay? That's in the Hawaii Constitution, that the counties have exclusive jurisdiction over property tax. So, uh, whatever the state is trying to do, they can't do it. They don't have the power. I mean, they can say, "Oh yeah, we established the counties, and like they're our kids, and we can do unto them as we please." That's not true. The uh, you know the counties have their own existence. They have elected officials just like the state does, but they have a responsibility, uh, under our Constitution, that is in some ways even exclusive of the state's power.
the state could not legislate this away with a statute, and this is a statute that would legislate it away. Where does the payment go under this pilot program? Does it go to the state or the county?
So it would go to the counties.
But what's happening, and I guess you're concerned about it, is that the state is telling the county how to structure its property tax, which is messing in to an area which is, traditionally and legally and constitutionally reserved to the state.
Right. There's actually a Supreme Court case that kind of came up because the state once upon a time passed a law that says, counties, you shall continue these exemptions in your property tax. And City and County of Honolulu says, no, we won't. The controversy went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, state, you have no business doing this. The property tax is the county's kuleana exclusively. So you, the state, can't mess with it.
Well, isn't it a slam dunk under that case?
Looks like it to me. Like I said, the dynamic is the counties have their own property tax. The state cannot mess with it.
So where is this bill sitting here? I mean, is there that kind of pushback being articulated? Do you think it'll pass anyway?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned that in the foundation's testimony, but I think it's still moving, so we will see how far it gets.
Okay, that sounds like a bad precedent, if you will. It runs over the rule you articulated about the rule you mentioned about the case and about the general constitutional architecture of our state, and that's of some concern in that if it happens here, if it happens with this pilot bill, it may happen again, and the state will take further liberties with the counties. That's
except that they really can't do it. I don't know if they realize it or not, but they can't do it. It's been litigated before, and I fully expect that the Supreme Court will follow their precedent.
Unless the Constitution was litigation, assuming the bill passed against your advice, and probably should be the advice of the Attorney General too. I don't know if that'll happen. It's kind of a conflict, isn't it? If the state is asking, does the Attorney General come in and say, no, this is unconstitutional? Who comes in? Does the county come in? Does a bunch of counties come in and say, we are the counties, you shouldn't do this? Or is it just a tax foundation?
Well, the counties can do that. That's what they did in that other case. Now, this was when Earl Onzai was Attorney General. Remember him?
Yeah.
So let's kind of look at another example of how this is playing out in our legislature. There is a bill to create what's called creative districts now, and this is kind of an interesting idea. The state of Washington already has it, and the idea is to see if you can designate certain areas, like around around downtown Honolulu in one part of Chinatown, for example, where you put a whole lot of artsy enterprises together, like painters, sculptors, whatever, and musicians, and supposedly let them feed off the energy of each other and create a very artsy themed place. Like I said, it's been success met with success in other places, like the state of Washington, and of course you've heard of other districts where this has already happened, like the Soho district in New York.
I have a lot of questions about this. There are condos in Kaka'ako, or at least there was one that I was aware of, where they structured the condo as a creative condo, and it was good. And indeed, the state could make a a creative area out of all of HCDA property there in Kaka'ako. But what strikes me is that this bill and similar kinds of bills would talk about property taxes, thus giving a break to all the people in the district on property taxes, which are a county function. And it goes to your point a minute ago, and they can't mess with the property taxes. That's for the county to do. But
So you're getting ahead of me a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
What the bill says is that the state's going to give some incentives in net income tax, which I think are not going to be worth very much, because a lot of these artsy enterprises don't make a whole lot of net income.
Mm.
And it says, counties, you may give these creative districts property tax exemptions or other incentives. You may. And I'm thinking, that's magnanimous of them. That particular part of the legislation accomplishes absolutely nothing. The counties can do that anyway.
Suppose they said in this bill, maybe it's the devil in the details. Suppose they said, we are going to make a creative district in this area. Any area where you have a certain sprinkling of creativity. Chinatown's a perfect example. We're going to make a creative district, but it's contingent. It's contingent on the county excusing property taxes or limiting property taxes in that area. And if the county wants to do that, up to them, totally up to them. We recognize their jurisdiction, their authority. But if they don't do it, we're not going to designate. This is not going to be designated as a creative district.
Yeah, that would be constitutionally perfectly fine. That's not what the bill says, but that would be perfectly fine if they wanted to play that way. As it is right now, the state wants to retain through the State Foundation of Culture and the Arts the ability to designate what creative districts are and what kind of businesses would be eligible for participation in them. But
it would be a lot easier if the state could find a way to give a break on state taxes, not county taxes. And so, like I said, they doesn't make much money, but suppose it was a condo, right? And the condo is going to be a condo developer. It's going to be subject to state taxes, and sort of like affordable housing, because in Kaka'ako, the retail, the business uses in a given condo are going to be, in the building somewhere. So if you said to the developer, we're going to give you a huge break on your capital gain or something, which is a state tax, then that's an incentive, and that allows them to create a creative district without messing with the property tax. The developer of the condo or the lessee of the space, there'd be some other kind of state benefit aside from the straight income tax. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think there's precedent for it. We already have enterprise zones, and in enterprise zones, the incentives are a GE tax exemption for a certain number of years, an unemployment tax exemption for a certain number of years. Well, it's on a sliding scale, and some income tax relief.
Yeah, you mentioned user fees here in your write-up, and I wonder how useful it would be to exempt a creative business in the zone from gross excise.
Well, that's, like I said, something that's in the enterprise zone statute. That's something they may want to consider for creative zones if they want to move this forward. Right now, it's not in the bill.
Yeah, I wonder, about who introduced this bill, who is backing this bill, who, if anybody, is opposing this bill. I mean, aside from the constitutional relationship issue between the state and the county, who wants this? It's nice to have a creative district, and we do have some, carved out districts that could be structured. I mean, the creative district here could be structured like them. But who wants this? Is this really an important initiative for the state?
Well, I don't know. I can find out soon enough who introduced it. But it was kind of interesting to me because the bill seemed to pop out of nowhere, and it just seems to be tooling along.
Well, this is an example of something you and I have talked about before. Somebody walks into a given legislator's office and says, I would like you to introduce this bill. I am your constituent, and I'm asking you nicely to introduce this bill. And without hardly reading the bill, the legislator involved introduces it. But if the legislator involved, in this case, had read the bill, looked at the bill, consulted about the bill, that legislator would have found the point you're making. That is, the state cannot mess with county taxes.
Yeah, so the bill is listed as having four main sponsors: Senator Dela Cruz, Senator Chang, Senator Keith Agaran, and Senator McKelvey.
Four big names.
Yeah,
I do wonder if they read this part and they tested it against the question of the constitutional relationship. And I suppose what they're saying is maybe they're trying to shortcut the whole thing by saying the county may give breaks on property taxes. That doesn't really mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. They got to come up with something better than that.
I think so.
This is a creative district without really having a district. I'm sorry.
Exactly. The other bill I had on my list was the primary bill sponsored by the Department of Transportation, and it deals with stormwater fees. And the bill basically says, you, the counties, shall exempt the state from stormwater fees. Now, so we have a question about what these things are, and can the state do this? On this one, since it's not property tax, there probably is. The state probably can do what they want to, because the counties are basically creatures that the state created by legislation, and they can give the counties such powers as they desire, except as otherwise provided, like in our Hawaii Constitution, where the voters, gave the real property tax power to the counties exclusively, and that overrides the state legislator's power.
What's the difference between a stormwater fee assessment and property tax?
A stormwater fee is it's a user fee, and it's based on something different than than ownership of real property. I'm not sure what it is based on.
I mean, if you said that it was really part of property tax or an assessment based on property, I would say they can't mess around. But I guess what I hear you saying is that from a legal point of view, that since it's not property tax, it's something else other than property tax, it would be legal. And I mean, that's kind of interesting because, on the reverse side of this whole relationship question, we can't let the counties tax the state. If this assessment is essentially a tax by the county on the estate, on the state, that creates a reverse problem of the same nature. It's the line between the division, the autonomy of the state from the county and the county from the state.
Yeah, that's a very interesting dichotomy, and it is presenting it in reverse. But then you got to remember that governments don't pay taxes; people pay taxes.
Mm-hmm. But governments always want money.
They do.
They're always looking for every penny. I mean, we've talked about this in so many contexts, like with the special funds and all those things. And I think it probably goes. We haven't examined so much on the county level, but probably goes for both levels. The state always wants money. The state is always looking for money, and often wasting it. And the counties probably have the same condition.
Yeah, I'm sure they could say the same thing about the state.
Yeah. So, who should be in the middle of this? Who should look at this relationship? Who should examine bills like this? Who should speak up? Because, the attorney general is kind of on one side of the equation. A conflict is too strong a word, but the attorney general is speaking for and with and on behalf of the state. And the county corporation council people speaking on behalf of the counties. Who besides the tax foundation and this show should be speaking to this and doing something about it?
Well, like you mentioned, the state has the AGs, the counties have the corporation councils, and then there's us.
Yeah, maybe put them in a room. And we could be in the same room, Tom, and just point out, maybe a committee room. We could just point out that there's an issue here that they ought to remember about.
Yeah, no. When you started the introduction to this show, you brought up another interesting problem that's been simmering between the state and county for decades. It's called roads in limbo. Mm-hmm. What that means is that there are a number of highways and roadways where we know it's a public road, but we don't know who owns it in terms of between the state and the county, because the property records are inconclusive, or it came, you can't really trace it from the imperial orders or the the king's edicts and stuff like that. And the problem has been the roads need maintenance. So who's gonna maintain them? The state doesn't want to touch them, because if they do, they'll be committed to maintaining it forever. The counties don't want to touch them because of the same reason. So the roads don't get maintained. And that's a big problem.
You have differences in maintenance. You look at one road and it's a county road and it's I'm making this up, and it's well maintained. You look at another road, it's a state road right next door, right there, even in perpendicular. And these two roads are maintained at a different level. One is paved, one is not. One has been better at the war against potholes, one has not. And so you drive around Honolulu anyway, and we have a great differentiation. And I totally agree with you that you can't. The county is going to oppose taking new roads from the state, and the state is going to oppose taking new roads from the county, because nobody wants to spend the money to maintain them.
Yes, that's a big thorny problem. They've been wrestling with this for decades, and I don't know how it's ever going to be solved.
Well, I'll ask my question again, though. Who could address this? It's not going to be a court, is it? Could a court resolve this? If it's not a court, and it's not the legislature, give me the circumstances. How does that work? Who sues for what?
Yeah, that's a question. Who would be motivated to sue, right? Because nobody really wants it.
Yeah, is the county going to sue the state? Is the state going to sue the county? Does
Yeah,
anybody else have standing?
or maybe nearby landowners would sue because, hey, damn it, this road's not being maintained. Uh, Somebody go fix it. And so the landowner would have to sue both the state and the county, and then the judge could figure it out. But who's willing to go through that kind of time and expense? Very, very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and no politician wants to get his hands on this. This is just too complicated, too political. There's no mileage in trying to resolve this problem. So you let it go. That's what happens. But for new bills like the ones you're talking about, somebody should be looking at that. And it
Oh,
strikes
definitely.
me that the Attorney General comes in on, I'm sure you've seen this many times. Attorney General comes in, sua sponte, walks into by way of a deputy, walks into a committee room and says, this is unconstitutional. This bill is unconstitutional. And the committee, usually will respect that, or not always, but usually. And so the same Attorney General could walk in and say, this bill does not correctly reflect the case law or the Constitution. You should not pass this bill. I would see that as an obligation of the Attorney General, even though the state is seeking a benefit in this bill.
Yeah, I believe that's what the AG's office does have that responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's happened a long time, and it's happened in many contexts, and it will probably happen again. And I think if we are seeking, and I know you are, and I am too, a more efficient state, a more efficient allocation of taxes and resources, this is something that should be resolved.
Yeah, the worst possible thing is for the state and county to fight each other. Then all these resources get expended, and the taxpayers lose.
Yeah. Boy, it's a good thing you're looking at this, Tom. I really appreciate that. We should all appreciate that. Tom Yamachika, president of the Tax Foundation of Hawaii, helping us understand how these things work.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.